Hey guys, welcome back to episode number 10 of Southern U. And if you guys are new to the show, we just try to provide education resources for those that are interested in land management.
I'll make an adjustment.
Oh, okay, you got to make one small adjustment there for all things land related in the Southeast. My name's Taylor McMurtry, joined with Jeremy Ferguson of Wildlife Consulting Services and Tut Land Company, and the Ale Deer legend, Matt Brock.
Yes,
Dadgummit. Y'all,
Yes.
You're making me exceed the noise level.
Yeah,
on this
came
thing.
in hot on that
Listen,
one, buddy.
I want to be introduced as Matt Brock of Habitat First Properties.
No.
Also known as the Ale Deer legend.
Yeah, if we can add that in, we're good.
Yeah, we're fine. We said this last time. Give the people what they want.
Mason, one day they're going to make me mad. I'm going to go crazy on this podcast. Tear all the cameras up, knock them down.
Oh, welcome back, guys. I guess by the time this one drops,
Deer season's over.
Yeah, deer season will have ended.
Thank the Lord.
In the
Good
state
grief.
of Alabama. And actually, I guess we will be, technically speaking, Lord willing, we'll be at NWTF right now.
Yeah.
I guess. So,
I hope.
So anyways, thank you guys so much for the continued support and hanging out with us. This last episode, we talked about your kind of listener, viewer request and tried to answer those questions the best that we could. And we're really appreciative of you guys sending those in. We obviously want to answer questions that you find interesting and stuff that you want to know about. That's what we're about. Today's episode is one that is somewhat of a hot topic and could potentially hurt some feelings depending on who you are and how you've been raised, I guess. But we're going to be talking kind of, I don't know, we could not really because of licensing purposes, but we could call this the Mythbusters episode of Southern U. but we're going to be talking culls, spikes, goofed up racks, half racks, / antler restrictions as a means for
All things antler.
Yeah.
And see, if I'd have known all this, I could have brought some examples and stuff. You got to let me know what we're talking about.
Well,
he wants the hot takes, man.
Yep, hot take. Well, yeah, hot takes and don't want you teed up too much either.
I know
right?
it.
So,
I know it.
A lot of us in the South, at least, were raised that you should shoot deer that are inferior looking as far as what's on their head.
Which is a lot of them.
Which is a lot of them. Yeah, they don't get too big when they eat pine straw. It's a joke. We know they don't eat pine straw, guys. But, it's pine country, whitetails. It gets really tough compared to other parts of the world. So, naturally, they don't look as good. But, there's a lot of different things that we've been taught, especially as kids growing up and things like that. We're going to go through some of these questions here and just see if there's any truth to them. These guys here they have the academic side of it. I have the backwoods country bumpkin side of it, I guess. But these guys have a little bit more experience in the field and can kind of back up with data and research and those things that you need to actually prove if something's true or not. So, guys, anything you want to add to or anything before we jump in? Nope. All right, then. Here we go. Question number 1. Do quote-unquote cull bucks exist, and is this term legitimate? You hear this term thrown around a lot. A lot of people go, oh, man, we need to take care of that deer. He's however old he is, and he's got whatever on his head. And the point is it's not what we want. It's not a deer that we necessarily want in our deer herd. So we feel like we need to cull this deer and get him out of the herd.
I'm going to start this episode off right.
Please do.
It depends.
And he's right.
That's the next T-shirt, guys. It depends.
In a free-range situation, no. There's no such thing as a cull. You're not gonna make any difference on the genetic material or makeup of that herd by removing quote unquote inferior bucks. Now, I've had multiple conversations with a lot of different guys that manage a lot of high end properties, and it does revolve around quote unquote culling, but they have a different mindset or goal. They are trying to remove deer that are smaller antler sized, that are aged, they're fairly confident, are 3 years old, or a lot of times younger. Unfortunately, it's where I rub. If I was doing this, I would probably start at 4 and do my 4s and 3s. But they're trying to just remove mouths out of the population.
It has more to do with carrying capacity than anything else.
They're strictly trying to manage their numbers, and they're leaving their best quality bucks out there, especially the young ones, the 2s and 3s is what their focus is. And they don't mind shooting some lower end 2 and 3 year old. But they're trying to remove that mouth, and they're doing it very selectively. Now, they are not changing their genetic makeup of their herd. They're just removing a mouth that's removing limited resources, food from their landscape. So,
Gotcha.
but in a fence, in a very controlled situation, absolutely you can cull.
Got it. Matt?
I mean, I agree. I've seen I hear it all the time. I remove this deer because of he's genetically inferior. Well, that's fine, but understand you killed a deer. If that was the reason that you killed it, then you're not doing any good. If you just say, well, I killed that deer because, well, great, I'm happy for you, but you're not removing that genetic makeup, like he said, from the deer herd. And if you look at heritability of genetic antler characteristics, there's been several studies now that have basically proven there's no way of knowing what a buck is going to produce. You can have a very high scoring buck that produces very low scoring offspring. And you can have very low scoring bucks produce very high scoring offspring.
Well, that's one of our buddies, Cody, managed a high fence out in Texas, and the same family owned a really large property in Texas where they do a ton of research. And some of their high scoring bucks, as a matter of fact, most of their high scoring bucks that's been out on the landscape for years, and we're talking 200 to 230 or so inch deer in free range situations now. They were sired by smaller antlered bucks. A lot of them, from best I remember, came from just good solid Texas 8 points.
That's right.
And they were producing these 210, 220 inch giants that, a lot of non-typical stuff came from a typical moderate scoring 8.
One of the most recent study, was it on the Comanche?
It was. It was all of Mick Hellickson's old stuff.
So one of their most successful breeders was a 126 inch deer.
Well, see, and I guess and it's not really a pushback, but it kind of makes me ask another question within this one, because you guys have heard me say this multiple times, that my dad used to raise deer in an enclosure, and he would sell them to hunting enclosures and things like that. Well, I mean, as far as that stuff goes, genetics is the name of the game. There were you would fall out in the floor and pass smooth out if you knew the amount of money that people were paying for straws of semen off of a particular buck.
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And if you're listening to this, you guys just, get online, do a little research, and see how much these straws are going off, for these very particular bucks that are extremely high scoring and stuff. It's unbelievable. I remember when my dad got started, it was either in 99, I think it was in 99. He bought 2 does that had been inseminated by a buck called Sudden Impact. And
I remember that deer.
I know that deer.
Okay, a lot of people do. He paid, and again, now this is a long time ago, almost 25 years ago now. It's crazy to think, but it is 25 years ago. But paid like $2,000 per deer that had been inseminated with, because in hopes, right, that they throw, offspring that are giants. So when you're saying, hey, look, it's not necessarily guaranteed that that's going to happen, boy, people sure do shell out the money for it.
They
to
do.
do
Well,
it.
I mean,
So-
when you get pedigree deer, like you got
That's
does that
the difference.
consistently produce high-scoring offspring and bucks that consistently produce high-scoring offspring, you can do that.
Yeah.
But I know a guy with a breeder buck down the road that's in the 180s, and he has produced a wide array of offspring from 1-year-old spikes to 1-year-old 10 points, and then at 2 they may be 80 inches, and his brother may be 120 inches. You never really know.
Gotcha.
Especially in a wild herd, you really don't know.
Yeah.
And the majority of the genetics that's passed along from the doe anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the Mississippi State studies recently, and I read it, but I can't begin to remember the how heritable certain antler characteristics were. But we can pin that study to podcast or something.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a certain percentage of chance that the number of points was heritable, and there was another certain percentage chance.
NDA published that not long ago.
Yes, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the width, and then the tine length, and they were all very low numbers.
Very low, like in the 20s or less.
Yeah, 20s or less.
So if a deer has 14-inch G2s,
Yeah.
the probability that would be passed on to his offspring was 20%.
Yeah,
Ooh.
so very slim.
Yeah.
But in the deer breeding side of things, it's pedigree. You have a much better chance of producing these type genetics when both the doe and the buck come from pedigrees that have been producing those type antlers for 20 generations.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, there's much less variability or much
Right.
less chance for throwing out what they would probably consider a dud. When you've got 20 generations of producing 180-inch deer.
Yeah. And it's wild too how even I realize it's probably not necessarily what the average listener of this podcast is dealing with, but how much that high fence enclosure type game has changed in that period of time too. Like a 200-inch deer
Unbelievable.
was just unheard of. I mean, then it was unheard of. That's why sudden impact. That deer was just so famous. It was just like gargantuan numbers, but. You fast forward 10 years and it's nothing.
Nothing.
It's nothing. I mean, there's 2-year-olds
Yep.
that are 200-inch. You know what I mean? And so it's just crazy to think how far we've come in that scope of time. But anyways, that being said, I mean, the only thing I was going to ask about the cull stuff, do you feel like, or not do you feel like, but to what degree or what percentage would you say people take deer and call them culls?
Oh yeah.
As
Just
an
because
excuse.
just as an excuse to kill
It
something,
just
to
makes
shoot
them
one.
feel better.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're trying to justify it to themselves.
Yep.
If you're proud of the deer, just shoot it. You don't have to look at me and say, "Hey, Matt,
That's
I
right.
killed it because it's a cull." Just say, "Matt, here's a deer I shot.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
I'll congratulate you." But don't make excuses for what you decide to shoot.
Yep.
I think it's a large percentage that's using it as an excuse, but I don't think it's equal to, but I think it's another large percentage of the folks that are just uneducated on the matter, on that particular
They
matter.
really think they're
And-
doing something
yeah,
beneficial.
and they don't know.
Right.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of people out there that don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
That's right.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's good stuff. If we haven't hurt your feelings already, we're about to. The second question here is, will a spike always be a spike?
No.
That is something that we have heard a lot.
It depends.
That's right. It depends. Yeah.
Yeah, we might as well just start every answer with
Yeah.
that. But I mean, I know, growing up, I mean, I was taught by not just like my dad or whoever, but like everybody that we hunted with. I saw a spike this morning. Why didn't you shoot it? That's all it's ever going to be, anyways. Kill it.
Yeah.
You know?
Especially those cow horn spikes.
Yeah, big old long
Yeah.
cow horns. Shoot them, man. And it's like, is there any truth to that?
No. I do not.
It can happen, but
Right. I do not look at any 1-year-old buck's antler development and say he's inferior. Not a single one. I don't care if they're half of an inch long, just barely breaking through the skin. Now, he may be underdeveloped among his cohorts of that age group, but, I've seen spikes produce some incredible antlers over time.
Yep.
And
But it goes back, if you're in a highly managed situation and you're managing the number of mouths on the landscape, and you've got a certain percentage of your yearling bucks that are spikes, but you've got another percentage that are forked antlered, you know, make that decision early on, and you can remove those spikes.
Right.
Now, whether or not you're doing a whole lot of good, you know, in a native situation, there's no telling.
I mean, look, I know
exactly,
some landowners, and there's nothing wrong with this. Actually, it's very beneficial in certain situations. Going back to really, it does depend on what your objectives are. But over, say, a landscape, if I'm trying to recruit X amount of deer into the 5 and 6 year old age class, then that means, and all things equal, I'm in control of that. You know, there's no external factors. Then if I start out with 40 1-year-old bucks on this property, and 20 or 30% of them are spikes, and then the rest of them have 4, 6, or 8 points at one. If I know I'm only going to be able to hold 10 mature deer on this property when the time they make it to that age group, I want to start removing those deer early and making those resources available to the older age class. And it also helps the antler development of the younger age classes because they've got more resources too.
Right.
So each age class of deer is showing more of its potential.
and it's, you know, not antler development, but it's the same principles on whether or not you're trying to grow a population or hold one steady or reduce it. You can target particular age groups of does and kind of do the same thing. If you're wanting to grow a population, then you need to be shooting your young does and letting your experienced mothers stay on the landscape. If you're wanting to keep it static or even drop it, you need to shoot those experienced does and leave the younger does in the age class or in the breeding structure, because they're going to be less successful overall. So you can hold a population fairly steady, or you can trend it down.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting because, I mean, I know there's a lot of studies and, you know, that would probably say otherwise, but in the South, my thought has always been, you know, if you say, all right, every spike that I see, I'm going to shoot. There's a lot.
Be many to your
No,
You're going to remove
a lot
big
of deer
percentage.
because, we joke around about it, but in all honesty, I mean, pine plantation provides almost no nutritional benefit. You know, unless you're burning it and you're getting kind of some
you're managing it,
and you get some native browse showing up to provide some nutrition. But apart from that,
I know some people probably call me crazy, and they're really going to say he don't know what he's talking about. I think I have gotten to a point where now I can pretty well tell most of the 1-year-old bucks that are born here and the ones that come in, because there's a drastic difference in body weights and antler development. Yes. It's not uncommon for us. When we really started managing this place, we had I'd say 80 to 90% of our 1-year-old bucks were spikes, a huge chunk of them. Now, over 50% of our 1-year-old bucks have 5, 6, 7, or 8 points.
Yep.
I've got multiple 8-year-old or 8 points in the 1-year-old age class this year.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Used to never see that. So these deer that, you know, are not growing up here, where there's been a lot of habitat improvements and deer herd structure improvements, deer that are moving in from other places, I see
spikes.
80 and 90 pound spikes that are, you know, inch and a half. I don't think those deer were born here.
Really?
I just don't.
Or could be late born.
They could be late born, but when we got our sex ratios,
They shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be. They shouldn't be late born fawns.
Gotcha.
And I don't see a lot of late born fawns around here.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting stuff there. So next one here, this is kind of a long question, but y'all just bear with me. Just because a buck's rack isn't desirable, okay, whatever is on his head is not what you're looking for. If it's too small or if it's, you know, trashy or whatever. I know we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but does that mean that he will pass those antler characteristics on to its offspring? I know we've talked about it a little already, but you know, if something shows up, just like you said, hey, it's got half a rack. You know, it's got split brows on one side and it's got 4 points on the other side. Should we shoot that deer because we don't want him passing on his genes to the rest of our deer herd? Should we let him be? Are we doing any good if we do take him out of the deer herd?
I'll say this. If you have as far as deer health and herd health is concerned, if you have enough deer in those older age classes that will allow you to remove that, because I like to keep some deer in the 4, 5, and 6 year old age class in a deer herd if possible. It just it aids in so many health aspects for that herd. So if I have those deer available, then removing that deer is not going to be an issue. If I'm lacking in mature deer in that population, I may choose to leave that deer because, like we've already discussed, I'm not worried about his offspring looking like him. They may or they may not. In the case of half racks or spike on one side, overwhelmingly those are injuries. It, you know, and you say, well, he grows that way every year. Right. He's got an injury to the pedicle on his base.
That causes that.
That causes
That's
that.
right.
So that's not a trait that's going to be passed down to his offspring under any circumstances, because it's not genetic in nature. So, you know, like, I hate to say this again, but it depends. I mean, it really, and that's the thing about deer management. It's not a one-size-fits-all.
That's right.
And the recommendations that I make for one landowner may not be what I make for another. It depends on what their objectives are and what they're trying to accomplish, and whether they're free range or whether they're in a fence. It all changes.
Sure.
And the spike on one side, are we going there, or is that part of this question?
It's kind of part of this one.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the one thing that I prefer to shoot the spike on one side deer most of the time revolves around bucks fighting. A spike on one side is a perfect way to have some of your bucks that you're trying to keep around. Maybe some of your less mature bucks that you want left in the breeding class. If they're fighting with a buck that's got a spike on one side, man, that's a sure enough eye gouger and can do some damage. When fighting, we'll see a lot of gored bucks, through the years or through the season. But I have noticed, if you look at bucks, if you've killed them during the rut or after the rut, or tail end with just a spike or just a split on one side, you'll see a lot of times that those deer have got blood on those spikes. And I try to shoot them from that standpoint, because I don't want them injured, a deer that we're trying to keep around.
I mean, and so you're saying they have the ability to do that, though?
Yeah, they do, because you got two normally formed antlers. The spike, if it's just a long kind of curved spike, it doesn't interlock with an antler like a normal formed antler would. So you'll get them to where they're twisted around, and they'll get an eye on one of your other bucks, or they'll stick them in the throat. So because they have the propensity to do that more than a normal formed antler that's locking up, good. I want them out as best I can.
Yeah. I mean, I guess to me, anytime that I've had, just maybe it's either on a plot or something like that, or on a flat piece of ground, and you've got young bucks showing up, and then all of a sudden a mature buck shows up. It's almost like, hey, man, show's over. Yeah. Because they don't want any. The young guys are like, all right, I'm fine. They might bow up for a second, but they ain't coming after a 4 or 5 year old deer if you're a yearling or something like that. Right. And so I guess that was my question, is like, have y'all seen like young bucks tie up with a 5-year-old? Like, does that happen?
In most cases, no.
Right. But a good 3-year-old, that's stout, and I'm not talking about antler, a good body size 3-year-old and 4-year-old. See, we're trying to shoot 5-year-old deer.
Sure.
So if we've got a 5-year-old out there that's spike on one side, a 4-year-old will absolutely tie up with him. And, one of your biggest bodied 3-year-olds might, because there again, it depends. You've got a lot of deer out there that they don't act dominant. You may have some young all the way up to older age class bucks that they don't want to get in a fight. They kind of hang in the back. They're submissive. And then you've got a lot of bucks out there, even young bucks, that by gosh, they got a chip on their shoulder and they're going to fight. And you'll see that. You'll see some of the times they'll display that, just in pictures or in videos that you got from cell cams. They'll have that head cocked in pictures, and they'll have their ears laid back, and they'll be bristled up. And you're like, what in the world is that little guy doing? Man, some of them just are always looking for a fight.
Yeah, right.
It's an individualistic behavior. I mean, some deer just out looking for a fight all the time, and some are not.
Yeah, I got you. That's interesting always to kind of get other perspectives on it too. This is kind of the one that I am probably the most excited to hear what you guys have to say about is antler restriction and effective management strategy. You'll hear a lot in our areas of the world here in our southeast, whatever, certainly in Alabama. You've heard us talk about clubs. Now, I imagine most of our audience that's listening to this is probably in the South too. You don't hear about this type stuff much in the Midwest. An individual in the Midwest will lease a farm, or 2 or 3 people lease a farm or piece of ground, and they are the only ones that hunt that property. Down here, it's not to say that doesn't happen, but it's a lot more common to say, hey, we're going to go get out 4,000 or 5,000 acres of land, and we're going to get 50 members, whatever, even over 100 members to help pay this lease. And so now there's 50, 60, even 100 people hunting a piece of property at any given time. And so most of the time when that happens, you have someone who's kind of a director, president, whatever you want to call them. You have some other supporting cast role type people that, maybe get voted on or whatever it is. But you have some pecking order that determines the harvest restrictions on this particular area, piece of ground, whatever. So a lot of times, at least you'll see this in the South, hey, we're 8 points or better club, saying, hey, we don't shoot bucks unless they have at least 8 points or more. Virtually every single club that I've ever been in my life, even as a kid, even hunting with my dad and stuff, has had some sort of rules like that to say we're 6 points or better, or we're 8 points or better, or even there's even QDMA standards where there's 5 criteria. In order to harvest one, you've got to meet 3 of the 5 or whatever. We're just talking about the number of antlers, the number of points on their head. Is that an effective means of managing a deer herd? Yes or no?
No.
A simultaneous no from both of the biologists. All right. Now, why is that? Why should people do away with that strategy? You can't give a simultaneous no and then go crickets.
Well, I just didn't want to jump in before he did. The answer is going to be the same.
It depends.
Yeah. It depends. That's right.
Of all the criteria that you could use to determine, how to harvest bucks, that is the worst.
The worst.
Yeah.
It's terrible. I mean, think about it. What's the dumb deer in the woods, quote unquote? They're the young deer.
Yeah.
You just heard Matt say we've got several that are yearlings that are 4, 6, 8 points. Well, in that age class, our 8 points are by far the best deer we've got. So we've got 8 points as yearlings.
Yep.
The best deer we have on the property for the future is now eligible for harvest.
Right. So
and going to get shot.
And going to get shot because he's club legal.
Yep.
So and when you've got multiple members on a property like that, you may have, you over there saying, well, I really on this property, I want to kill deer that are at least 3 or 4 years of age. Jeremy over here may go, I'm killing every legal buck I see. So, you may pass up a deer that he shoots, and that just leads to strife in the club, and it leaves, I let that deer walk. I can't believe he shot that deer. You've got bad criteria, harvest criteria.
He's legal.
Right, he's legal. You don't say a word. If that's what you're going to set your standards at, don't say a word when somebody shoots a yearling.
Absolutely. I mean, I've personally been in clubs like that, and it's like you bring one in that meets your criteria, and people get red over it. And it's like, look, man, I'm just playing by your rules.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you didn't want me to shoot it, then you need to change your rules or whatever. Because, we joke around about this a lot, but like, I just enjoy bow hunting. I just like it. It's not really doesn't mean anything other than that's how I enjoy to hunt. So generally speaking, my criteria for what I harvest is generally lower than what other people's might be. Not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying
we're not mad at you, Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, there's some people that are like, yeah, man, I get it, and some people are like, I can't believe you shot that deer, and I'm like,
Right.
dude, I've got a bow in my hand. You know what I mean? And so, for me, it's never been a deal of like I'm going to shoot every deer I see because I can't. It's impossible, you know. But if something gets within bow range of me that gets my blood pumping, I don't feel bad about shooting it. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of people out there that will argue about that, though.
No, that's fine. There's clubs for you, Taylor.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
That's right. A lot of them.
Yeah,
One next door.
that's right. Hey, give me a bow only club. I'll be in heaven, man. Like we'll do it.
Well, and your criteria in that question was antler points.
Yeah, sure.
Or the number of points. And there's a lot of clubs that just got a mixed bag, whether it be beam length, number of points, width.
Oh yeah.
And let's face it, none of them are great. Actually, the way I look at it, none of them are even good. But for the average hunter, it's something that they can easily look at in the woods, make a quick determination, and take an ethical shot. But if I were running a club, my preference is to be shooting age class, and to do that, you've got to be able to look at a deer and determine how old it is.
Right.
And
which we know Jeremy's not real good at.
Oh, shots fired!
Yeah,
Shots fired!
Yeah.
Well, and that's
Hey,
I'm
no,
sorry,
I
man.
deserve that
You
one.
set that one up.
I did.
You did. I mean,
and that kind of leads into the next one. But I'm going to say that's what I was getting at too. Is like if you're saying, hey, this is the worst criteria you could possibly have to determine what is eligible for harvest. Well, then what's the alternative? What's the best way, or what should
the best way is by age.
Yes.
that's absolutely the best way.
And I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about the club. To have a successful club, even though unsuccessful ones are run this way, but to be successful, in my opinion, and this is just from years of doing what we do and running, with a company through the years, over 1,000 hunting clubs in my career that I've had to deal with. By and large, the best run clubs are a dictatorship. It's one person on the top making the decisions.
Yep.
Now, the management of that club, the downfall is that one guy. So if that one guy's an idiot,
Yep.
then you probably don't need to be in that club.
Right.
Now, if it's a guy that's management minded and is pushing quality management decisions, then it's probably going to be a pretty good club.
Yep.
But shooting age class is by far what people should strive to do, but that is tough.
And it's often not feasible.
No.
It depends on where your hunters are at.
It does.
And, if you look at, right behind that, I've helped manage a lot of properties that were very successful at getting deer to whatever age class they wanted based on one of two criteria, just being inside spread or beam length.
Yep.
So, I mean, usually if you're wanting to, say, protect deer in the 1 and 2 year old age class, and y'all are going to say, okay, anything that's 3 years old or older is eligible for harvest. First thing you got to have is data. You got to know what is the average beam length and inside spread of a 2-year-old. What is it for a 3-year-old? What is it for a 4-year-old? And then you set your criteria based on that. So, what I usually try to do, you're obviously going to have outliers, but if we're trying to protect deer until they're 3 years of age, I want to set my criteria where I'm protecting at least 90% of my 2-year-olds. So if you don't have baseline data on main beam length and inside spread, you don't know where to
no idea.
have those parameters.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, it is tough because, like I said, I've been in clubs like that where you do have, width restrictions or lean, main beam length restrictions or point restrictions. And me and Jeremy were talking about this on the way down. One thing that really turns me off about clubs like that, and that's why I'm not in one anymore, is, at the end of the day, like, why do any of us do this? Like, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to, like, this is what I do to relieve stress. This is what I do because I enjoy it. When, you're in a tree and all of a sudden, you have an opportunity to harvest something, a lot of times, especially if we're, talking about rut stuff, that can happen really, really quick. You have an opportunity, and it may be seconds. You have to make a decision on, yes, that deer is eligible, take a shot, or no, it's not. And so I would feel like the main reason that a lot of these clubs go to antler restriction, being a means for determining harvest, is just because it's easier to do for the average person. Like most people can't go, something. I'm not saying not to discredit the general population. I'm just saying it's a lot easier to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, I can shoot that. Instead of going, is his brisket saggy? Is his back swayed? You know what I mean? What color is his face, his nose, and stuff? Like, it's just a whole lot easier to just count some points and make a decision on whether or not to shoot. But I just don't like adding the stress of, oh gosh, are people going to get mad at me if I shoot? What if I made a wrong decision? What if I end up shooting the wrong deer? Now I've got to listen to everybody else talk about it. Like, I just got to where I was.
Please air the episode where he shot the 3-year-old can, and you'll see how you should respond to those type of people. No, I mean, I've said it on the podcast before. It's not worth ruining relationships and making enemies over. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a stinking deer.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Absolutely.
And I think a big part of it has gotten past the deer side of it and the social side of it. I think now is so monetized that's why people get so mad and so frustrated.
There's no doubt.
I mean, there's guys spending thousands and thousands of dollars to have a really nice place to hunt when their neighbor camps out on the line and shoots every deer that they pass year in, year out. And that's where the evolution of hunting is still taking place. And we've said it before, we have conversations constantly about people high fencing properties, and it's getting more popular, and it's going to continue to get more popular. I'm going to meet with a guy down south next week. Got a beautiful place. He's got a neighbor that owns 20 acres and sits on the line and shoots absolutely every deer that crosses the line that's 2 years old or older, and they don't have, the neighbor doesn't have the acreage to produce a bunch of them, but they can produce 2 or 3 a year, really good deer, and he's losing every one of those deer every year to that guy. There's a fence going around it.
Yeah.
I mean, the neighbor could have worked with him and just been like, hey, I'll do my best. I'll shoot one of these deer that I'm happy with, and then we can work together on what to shoot, from there. No, it's his property. He's going to do what he wants.
And that's the attitude of a lot of, it's my property. I'm going to do whatever I want to. Well, that's fine.
And it is. That's fine. That's his property. He paid for it. But now he created an enemy across the line, and he's going to have a fence thrown up around it, and he'll never kill another one from coming from that direction.
Right.
He's wrapping 2 sides. He's got another this property lays out poorly for this guy now because he's got big open land on the other side. He's not going to have very many deer.
They have to work real hard to get around that too. They have to have a real good reason to come over there.
Yep. And that's, unfortunately, that's the evolution of it.
Right.
But back to the spike on one side of the antler characteristics. He mentioned the width and the spread. When I was running a bunch of turnkey leases, we did a 2 or 3 criteria, and it was based off of the number of points, the width, and the beam length. So they just had to meet 2 of those 3 criteria. Yeah. Now, that's a lot to look at, but we were able to protect 90% of our 3-year-olds that way. We could up it and get away from the 2-year-olds and protect our 3-year-olds.
Right.
And, we were targeting 4 and 5-year-olds.
Well, and I guess too, like we always say, we keep saying it depends, but it also depends where you're at in the world too, right? Like,
it does, absolutely.
Because if you're describing those kind of antler characteristics, whatever your width needs to be,
it's different everywhere.
It's different everywhere. If you've got good data, like you're talking about, then you figure that out. Then occasionally, will you kill a deer that's not 4 or 5 years old? Yes. Now you've got to be okay with it though.
Yep.
Like, you know what I mean? As the club president or whatever you are, you've got to go, hey, look, meets criteria.
Yeah.
Nothing, can't get mad about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
one club years ago, they asked me, we went to 120-inch minimum, gross score, and we're killing fewer big bucks than we used to. And I'm like, that's easy. You're high grading. Because some of the dumbest deer in the woods are 120-plus inch 3-year-olds, and they're going to get shot because they meet club criteria. Yet, that is your 140 and 50 and 60 inch deer at 4, 5, 6 years of age.
That you were killing.
Yeah, that's what you were killing beforehand, before you went to the 120 minimum.
You created a high grade situation.
Yeah, and especially now with bait and cell cameras, you can get a really good handle of what you got walking around the place, and people will select individual deer to kill, and you're not the only one that's got that deer on camera. I promise.
Oh yeah. Sure,
So,
we've talked about it a lot, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I know a particular piece of property that has a a waiting list a mile long for people trying to get in and just can't get in it because it's such a very small spot, and it's like 700 or 800 acres or so, but it's bow hunt only. Really nice place. And I know the guy personally that manages it and kind of oversees everything, club rules, all that kind of stuff. And he just constantly preaches, boys, if you just let them grow, we can kill big deer in Alabama. I'm telling you right, you just got to let them grow. Quit killing everything. And to his credit, yes, you can. But I also know that in the time that they've had this property, which is about 20 years, they have killed one buck several years back, scored 153, I believe. Killed another one even farther back than that scored like 172, 173. I mean, just a giant for Alabama. And he was like, see, you can do it. And I'm like, okay, man, like I'm not going to pour 20 years of my life into killing a deer. I'm sorry, man. Like, that is not appealing to me at all. Now, to somebody else, maybe it is, but like, can you grow them? Well, I mean, obviously you killed it, so yeah, you can. But,
and see, that goes back to saying where it is, and I got a fair idea where that place is, I'm guessing. But in some of these areas of the state, now leave the booner out, but 140, 150, 160 inch deer, very obtainable.
Yeah.
140, maybe a little bit plus, can be obtainable on an annual basis, pretty easily. But it's, a little quarter inch.
Yeah,
that's right. On a good rifle, it's a lot less than that.
Yeah,
about a 16th.
Right. Yeah, less than 2 pounds of pressure too.
Yep,
that's right.
But it's from a really intensively managed situation. We're in a small club. Small clubs can do this. Big clubs struggle. But man, use those cameras to your advantage. ID these deer ahead of time and create a hit list of bucks. And man, don't stray from it unless you know you can age a deer on the hoof.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. I mean, and that's, I encourage communication. And, people,
that's the problem.
This is one thing I don't like about larger clubs. You always have a few guys that they're coming to that situation like, I'm not telling anybody anything. I'm going to hunt how I want to. And as long as I'm killing deer that are club legal, I'm not going to worry about it. That's fine. But it helps when you're communicating, because that way, if everybody's sharing information, you don't have to tell where you're getting pictures.
Yeah.
But if everybody's sharing the deer that they're getting, then you can develop that list. Say, okay, guys, these are the 5 deer that we're going to try to target this year. Leave everything else alone, unless you have a wanderer come through during the rut, and that happens. Don't happen around here for some odd reason. Never has. Not much anyway. I did get one 6 or 7 year old deer on camera this year. That was a solid 10. Never seen him before, and he was not my neighbor's. He ended up not being the neighbor's deer that I thought he was. Yep, not. Because that deer got killed, and he's not the same deer.
Okay.
So, you'll pick up deer, but developing that list and having good communication with everybody goes a long way. But there's just too much jealousy. I mean, there's just a lot of jealousy in deer hunting.
And you can learn those deer easily, if you'll look. Matt's unbelievable, but he spends that much time looking at deer. I don't anymore. I mean, we'll get pictures of deer, 2 years down the road. He goes, oh, I remember that deer. And he'll call it so-and-so and, call where it was, and he'll pull up a picture, and you're like, yep, that's him. Or somebody will kill one 3/4 of a mile down the road and go, oh, that's so-and-so. That used to be on so-and-so's place about 10 days ago. I'm like,
What?
You don't miss your wife's anniversary or birthdays or anything like that, though, do you?
No. But if you'll take the time, and that's part of it, is a lot of people don't want to take the time to
It
study
takes
these
a lot
things.
of time to study them.
But what kills me is they put a ton of money into it, and they put a ton of time and effort into it, but that's the only step that they tend not to spend any time on, and say, well, I just don't have time. I'm like, man, you're here every weekend. Take one weekend out and study deer, ahead of the season, and you'll have a fair idea of what's going on. But the communication and the jealousy is by far the biggest thing. What's wrong with hunting today?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of truth there too. And like you said, I mean, it probably does need to be a dictatorship. Probably does need to be one person instead of some kind of committee. And
when you have multiple people trying to make the decisions,
it's a nightmare.
Nobody can ever agree on everything.
No.
It can be a nightmare.
I mean, whenever I was on staff at the church, we used to have a saying, and we'd say it a lot. The only thing with more than one head, the only thing with 2 heads is a monster. Because there's nothing good that comes from that. You got multiple people pulling in different directions, and generally speaking, nothing good comes from that. So.
I've never been involved, and that's either hunting with or in or help in assisting managing a club that had a board or had multiple people making decisions that was successful long term and remained cordial and friends.
Yes, that's
not
right.
one. They all parted ways, and generally under bad terms.
Yep.
Over trying to communicate about killing a deer.
Yep. And if you've got one person making the decisions and saying, okay, guys, if they're an effective leader, if they're a good leader, and they say, these are our harvest criteria, this is what we're going to kill, and that's it. And as long as, here's where you also run into a problem, if that dictator or leader doesn't follow their own rules, then it's bad. It can get really bad.
Yeah, no doubt.
But if they're a good leader and they're a good communicator and they get the right people, that system works so well.
The last real club that I was in Randolph County. The club itself was the easiest place I've ever hunted in the state to just see deer consistently. And it had a board and it had a president or whatever you want to call it. And as soon as that season was over with, he was gone. Mm-hmm. It was like they ran him out of town because, things didn't, like you were saying, things didn't mash up exactly. Things didn't tend to jive with everybody else in that club. And, and that is, it's kind of sad that something like that can ruin relationships and that sort of stuff, but it absolutely did. And me and my dad both got out of it. Of course, we didn't, once everything started going downhill, it was like, we're not going to do this again next year.
Listen, a deer and a turkey and a duck has ruined more relationships than a woman ever has.
Oh, absolutely. I you know what my motto is for years? I would tell people, the blood of Jesus Christ can cover a multitude of sins except for those perpetrated by other hunters. Really.
Amen.
I'm serious, because that is like the unforgivable sin as far as the relationships between two people.
Yeah,
you mess up hunting, and it can go south quick.
It can. And I wonder, anyway, I don't want to get off too far in the weeds, but I wonder if that's because it has been so monetized, like we're talking about.
A big part of it.
I think it's a lot to do with it.
A lot, which and again, to me, I don't have a place where I've spent a pile of money to try to improve or anything like that, but I probably would feel the same way. But for me, it's more like, look, I am out here. I'm trying to have fun. Stop, keeping me from having fun. You know what I mean? Like, let me do my thing. And so that's really, it's like,
I know that's the problem with me, because I get frustrated, and they know who I'm talking about.
We try to rein him in.
Yeah, I dare not speak of the money that I have spent over here, because I'm afraid my wife might one day listen and catch this very clip.
This is not a short clip, okay? This is not a reel. Don't reel this.
No, don't.
Sorry,
but
guys.
the amount of money that I have spent over here to kill nothing in the last I added it up, and I'm not going to say it on here.
Don't do it.
But just in the last 3 years is ridiculous, and it's
frustrating because when you're spending that,
it ticks you off.
The more you spend, the more you expect.
Yeah.
And when you can't achieve your objectives because other people have no self-control, it gets frustrating.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's one, the argument that I'll hear a lot for people talking directly to me is like, well, if you don't like all those club restrictions, you like all that stuff, then go hunt you some public land. I'm like, dude, that's worse to me.
Well, I disagree.
I do too.
I disagree.
Because it's like, again, I'm putting my – and again, I guess you could say just kind of persevere and kind of push through it. But in a sense, I'm kind of sort of putting my fun or my enjoyment in somebody else's hands because I can't help if somebody walks on top of me.
Well,
if I do my homework and I do everything I'm supposed to do and somebody just comes tromping in there on top of me, like, I can't help that.
Let me say this on public land. There are some public land areas within 40, 50, 60 miles of right here where the age structure of bucks harvested is going to be higher than most of your better managed clubs and less pressure. And if you're an archery hunter, you can go out there and hunt tens of thousands of acres and probably not see anybody else.
If you're fat and out of shape like me,
then that's not an option.
Y'all stay in your club.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's trying to say.
But I'm just trying to say there's great public land opportunities with good age structures available to hunters in Alabama.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Last thing here, and before we don't get too far off here, is we've said, hey, antler restriction is not the best way to do it. It's probably the worst way. Age is probably the best. All right, this is kind of my question for you guys as opposed to somebody else's. What's the easiest way to determine if a buck should be harvested from the stand or the blind or whatever it is that you're hunting from? Like, obviously, we know that an older deer is going to have, kind of what they call the Roman nose, the long, elongated nose, and, pale coloration of the face. It's going to have a saggy brisket. It's going to have a sag in its back to kind of show that it's older. But I'm saying in the heat of the moment, when
easy.
When that buck, when it happens, we were talking about this on the way over here. When that opportunity presents itself.
Don't say what I think you might be about to say.
No,
I'm not.
I think I know what he's going
to say. It does depend. but no.
But I'm just saying,
the easy answer is if you stand still long enough.
Yeah. Because, listen, because of my dad's history having the deer, like I know how old every single one of those deer were in his enclosure. And so you can study them and look at them and, you know what I mean, and look at diagrams and read brochures and all that good stuff. But in the heat of the moment, when that opportunity presents itself.
I've got one rule of thumb, and I've said it on here before. If you're sitting in a stand, whether you bow hunting, gun hunting, however you're choosing to hunt, but if you immediately grab for something to look at the deer better, chances are that's not a deer that you need to be shooting, especially in the Midwest. If you're trying to observe that deer's characteristics even closer, chances are that deer's a borderline deer.
Yeah, so if you grab your binos or you grab a rangefinder or something like that, and you're
if you immediately grab your rifle or bow, chances are that's a deer better than anything else you've shot, and you're going to be happy. Now, whether or not it meets criteria of certain places, that's yet to be seen because that you never know what those criteria are. But we were talking about from a Midwest standpoint, and that is what I tell the guys that I'm guiding in the Midwest is, most of them have been pretty successful bow hunters. Otherwise, they wouldn't be up there.
Right.
But if they grab their binoculars and go to, I got to judge this deer, chances are that's not the deer you're looking for.
Right. Anything to add there, Matt?
Well, we talked about communication a few minutes ago and sharing pictures. So, if you've got that option, hopefully you can identify even on short notice. Because I've gotten glimpses of deer before and go, Jeremy said I was good at identifying deer. I study deer
All the time.
Probably too much.
He does.
But I can see a deer under a lot of circumstances and go, I know who that is. You don't always have that option. I kind of go for the oh crap. You know, if my initial thought is make him dead, he's big enough. If my initial thought is I need to get a better look at that deer, he's probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, and you know, I mean, like when I see a big mature deer, I'm so focused on chin in the dirt. I mean,
and I took it a little too far this year on identifying a deer based off of his rack. That deer right there. Okay.
Yeah.
That deer looks.
behold.
Yep. That deer looks just like the deer I was after. He just shrunk. Everything about him just smaller.
Yeah.
And I didn't give him any time at all. When I saw his head pop out, I was like, there is no other deer over here that looks that way. I got the gun, put the crosshairs on him, and shot him. Of course, my dumb self was not thinking, hey, it could have been a deer from down the road that looks similar. And now, granted, that deer had never been that we've seen on camera across the road on any other camera that we had on that farm.
Until that day.
But that day he decided to go on a walkabout. You know, that's in the research world. He went on his excursion.
Yeah.
Well, he died on his excursion.
He did. He became a statistic.
Yep. But he looked just like another deer, just shrunk. So sometimes you need to take a little better look. But now, you know, where I'm hunting, the deer I was trying to kill was a 6-year-old, probably, maybe 7.
I think he's at least 6.
Yeah. But still, he's a 110, 115 inches maybe.
He'll go mid to upper 110s, yeah.
Yeah.
But now he was 120-ish.
Yeah, he's been bigger before.
Oh, so y'all do have another picture of him somewhere.
Oh, we got years of
Years
pictures.
of him.
Oh, okay.
Years of pictures of that
Yeah,
deer.
but that deer there, he don't score a lot different, but his body characteristics, had I slowed down a little bit, were vastly different.
I didn't tell Jeremy this, but when I reviewed the footage, I was looking at the footage of when he shot the deer when we were walking downfield to go look for it. And I didn't zoom in, but I looked at the deer and I was like, that's not a 6-year-old deer. I didn't say a word because I wasn't sure. I was looking at it on a small lens. I'm just like, I don't think that's a 6-year-old deer.
When I'm walking up to the deer, I don't even see his full rack. I can just see a beam in the bushes and in the vines. And I turn around and look at him. I said, that deer ain't very big. And I turned around and looked, and I said, that can't be him. I said, it can't be. I said, the body's too small. And we get over there and grab the rack and pull it up, and I'm like, oh, my gosh.
You can just pick the whole deer up with one hand.
I was like, that's a deer from across the road.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess you hear people talk about ground shrinkage. Like, oh, man, he looked great, and I shot him, and I got to the ground. And
Well, this wasn't ground shrinkage.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like.
It was just misidentification.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, it happens. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean?
That one right there had ground shrinkage worse than any I've ever seen.
Worse than anybody. Me and my dad both have a story like this, except he legit killed a 2-year-old. And the deer, I'll just say this, the deer that I killed had the teeth, the wear of a 5 or older deer. He also had the body characteristics of that, but he was a midget.
Tiny.
But all of his shoulders, his neck, everything was just one big muscle. I mean, he was real stocky.
He looked huge.
Yeah, I
Looked
saw.
huge.
He did. I saw the deer walking through a cutover at 7:30 one morning, and I shot him and called. Shoot, man, I called like 2 or 3 different people.
Sent me a picture of the deer in the scope, still alive.
Yeah, and I was like, I just killed a 130-inch deer, and he looked 130. He looked like he had 10 or 11-inch G2s. 7 to 8-inch G3s,
Jeez.
Out past his ears, maybe 17 inches wide, good long main beams. I get down there to the deer. I think he scored 105.
Hey, he was on the phone with me, walking up to the deer, and he's huffing and puffing, walking out to this deer, and he gets there, and it just kind of gets quiet, and he says, "Let me call you back."
So the deer was he weighed 126 or 7 pounds, and his rack was outside his ears on both sides, which should have made him about 17 inches, but his ears were about 4 inches long. So He was 14 inches inside spread. His main beams that I thought were 20 plus, 16, and his 10-inch G2s were like 7. They were considerably longer than his ears.
Yeah.
But he was just a midget of a deer. And
Didn't you shoot that deer with a muzzleloader?
no, I shot him with
Was
a
it
30-06. Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't remember, but
Shot half his rack off, if you'll remember. Do you remember that? Not only was he a midget, but I removed half of his rack.
Oh Lord.
But he laid his gun down on the deer and sent me a picture, and the gun's as long as the deer.
Oh yeah. And it's like Mason, our guest. Say hi, Mason.
Yeah, Mason's back here.
Mason shot a deer yesterday, a mature 5 or 6 year old deer or older, and got a very respectable rack. He weighed 119 pounds. And
Yeah.
Cody shot that deer at the same property that I shot my midget. He shot a deer. He called me on the phone. He's like, I just shot a deer that's 24 inches inside. He's huge. He's a monster, probably 150-inch deer. Gets down there, too. He scores like, what, 121?
Yeah, it's right at 120.
Right at 120. He was 18 inches wide, but looked like a giant. He weighed in the 120s.
Mm-hmm.
And he was mature.
Yeah. It's wild.
Just midgets, small deer.
So look, you're gonna mess up.
Oh, absolutely.
Even if you're doing this off of pictures,
Sure.
Yeah.
you're gonna mess up. You can't get beside yourself. I mean, I was mad at myself, for a few minutes.
I thought it was hilarious.
He did, and
I was giggling the whole time.
it was entertaining, especially since it happened to me.
I would be mad if it happened to me.
Yeah, I got very tickled when it happened to him a few years ago. Probably made my season. But it's going to happen.
Yep.
You are going to shoot the wrong deer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Happens. Yeah, but that's I think you said, if you immediately grab your weapon as opposed to grabbing your optics, that's probably a good indicator. It's kind of like if you've taken a multiple choice, test, they always say just whatever your gut tells you the answer is to go with that. You're more often right than wrong.
Yep.
I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like it's C. It's probably
Grabbing optics cost me the largest deer of my life.
It costs
in
a lot of
Alabama.
people.
Yeah, grabbing optics cost me a giant years ago.
Me and Jeremy were talking about this on the way down, and in Pike County in Illinois, I had a similar situation where I hunted a morning and I saw 9 rack bucks that morning. Now, at this point in time, I would have been 23, I think. I would go entire seasons and not see 9 rack bucks. You know what I mean? And so I was just kind of freaking out a little bit. But they were all real small dinks, and at this particular place, there was a 130-inch minimum. So I'm like, obviously these are not anywhere close to that. Go back into the same spot that evening. I see this buck coming up this dry creek bed, and there's an Osage orange tree about 30 yards from me with a scrape under it. And every one of those bucks I'd seen that morning, they'd all gone straight to that scrape. I knew I'd already ranged it. It was 30 yards on the nose to it. And he comes right to that scrape, starts licking branches. I draw back, and I go, hold up a minute. Yes, this is way bigger than any deer you've seen so far, but those were all dinks. You know what I mean? Or is this going to meet 130 or not? And I've still got probably 20-ish minutes, 25 minutes of daylight left at this point. And all the other bucks that I had seen had checked the scrape and then just kept on coming down this kind of bottom, and they go past me at 17, 18 yards, and leave. So I'm like, let's just wait a minute. He's going to come right across here. Mm-hmm. I'll check and see, and that'll give me a better look at him. And if he's big enough, I'll shoot him. And I didn't know this, but there's a cut bean field out to the left-hand side of the stand, and there was a buck in that field that I didn't know was there. Mm-hmm. So he gets a glimpse of the buck in the field, immediately just cuts right across the creek bank, never comes to me, and gets out in the cut bean field. As the sun is going down, he stands there and he turns his head. And when he turns his head, the sun just lights his head up. And I'm like, you are the biggest idiot on the face of the earth. 130 all day. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much I was telling him. I don't know, I wouldn't say 140, 150, whatever, but easily 130. And I had to just watch him walk out in that bean field. But
walk out of your life.
Yeah, and it cost me. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But I should have just shot the thing because I knew, just kind of from experience. But anyways, But that's about covered it all, guys. We've actually talked for over an hour. So
we could talk an hour more about this little subject.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I guess we'll wrap it up. Anything you guys want to add to, or
I'm good.
Be a little late to invite folks to NWTF.
Yeah.
Hopefully
I guess.
we'll be there.
Yeah. Hopefully you're there right now.
That's right.
Yep. That's right. And at this point in time, we still don't have the sequel 33 from Darton in, but as soon as we do, we'll let you know and tell you how you can win that thing. It appears to be an incredible bow. If it's anything like the Prelude, you guys are going to love it because it's a great bow. Jeremy shot it and put an animal or two down this year with it, and so hope you guys are going to get this sequel before we will.
Yeah.
We're not even going to get a chance to shoot the thing. So, but yeah, stay tuned. Like we said before, it's not just a hunting podcast. This kind of covers all things land related. And now that we're kind of through the end of deer season, at least here in Alabama, I believe all of the Southeast is pretty much closed up for the season now. We're going to talk turkeys as we get into turkey season, that sort of thing. Obviously at NWTF, you'll hear us talking turkey stuff, but we're also going to try our best to cover more habitat type stuff, habitat improvement. We'll be talking timber, talking even kind of some real estate side of stuff. We'll be picking Jeremy's brain a little bit on how to maybe improve your property's value, maximize its value if you're looking to sell it or if you're looking to buy land, what to watch out for, what to be mindful of. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. So I'm pretty excited about that too. I love talking hunting, but it's going to be cool to switch gears and talk about some other stuff too, because these guys are a wealth of knowledge, and we'll get to go on a deep dive into whatever is in the minds of the Brock and the Ferg. So,
The Ferg.
yeah. Yeah, that's the way. This could have been a radio show, the Brock and the Ferg.
The AL Deer King.
Yeah, the legend and the Ferg.
The legend.
Oh man,
There's only one legend in Alabama that's any bigger than him, and that's Nick Saban.
Hey,
Right behind him is Matt Brock.
That's right. Still a sore subject, man. The goat's gone.
I couldn't be more excited.
Yes.
What are you going to do if the new guy is like better than Saban?
Not going to happen.
But what are you going to do?
Same thing I do now. I hadn't watched a football game in 3 years, so
Good.
no different. I mean, I'm still an Auburn guy through and through, but
You know what's sad? He hasn't watched a football game in 3 years, but he still hasn't killed a 140 in 3 years either.
I did too. I killed a
Not
140.
here.
No, not here.
So what are you doing with all that time you got?
I've killed one the last 2 years in Kansas.
Yeah.
I'm just going to start hunting other states and let you camp out down here.
That's fine with me. Less competition.
There you go.
You ain't got any over here anyway.
Oh, me. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate your continued support. Reach out to us on social media, and you can also email us at info@thesouthern.com. We'd love to hear from you if you've got any requests. We're going to do more kind of listener request, viewer request type episodes too. It was a lot of fun doing that last one too. So until next time, we will see you, and I guess we'll if you are at NWTF, go ahead and stop by and say hey.
Out.
See y'all.
Adios.